Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, January 17th. We're still dealing with a powerful storm system in the northeastern part of the nation. Strong winds today throughout that part of the country with 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. Even after the departure of the storm system to the north, the winds will be very strong right throughout the day today. It's still producing some mixed rain, sleet, and snow down in the southern part of the Mid-Atlantic region from D.C. across to the Philadelphia metro region. More significant snowfall falling to the north and west. Places like western New York State on the cold side of this storm system, and very strong winds this morning out of the east to southeast in New England on the northeastern side of this particular storm. So again, plenty to deal with over the next 12 to 24 hours or so in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the northeastern part of the nation. It produced some snow last night, places like D.C., Philadelphia. In D.C. anywhere from 2-3 inches or so. Philadelphia anywhere from 1-3 inches or so. And in all of those areas, the snow changed to sleet and then to freezing rain and ultimately to plain rain. Even some significant plain rain in the overnight hours as temperatures slowly rose to above freezing along the I-95 corridor region. And the reason there was that changeover is the inland track. Here's the current location of the storm system right now, way up there in upstate Pennsylvania. It took an inland track, moved over the I-95 corridor region around D.C. and then Susquehanna Valley and all the way up into upstate Pennsylvania. And given that kind of a storm track, milder air flowed in off the ocean and changed to snow, to sleet, freezing rain, and ultimately to plain rain in much of the mid-Atlantic region. And right now, this morning, there are some very strong winds out of the east to southeast along the New England coastline. Let me mention right here that coastal flooding is a concern throughout the northeastern quadrant of the nation today at times of high tide. And this not only a cautionary note is for the Atlantic coastline like New Jersey or Long Island, for example, but also for those areas in and around the Delaware Bay, the Chesapeake Bay, Annapolis, Maryland. Watch out at the time of the next high tide, for example. This system will slowly pull through upstate New York and then into interior New England over the next several hours. But again, we'll have to deal with strong winds throughout the day today and into tonight in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the Northeast. Looking beyond, it looks like the overall weather pattern remains quite cold, quite a bit colder than normal for the next couple of weeks in the central and eastern U.S., and we'll focus in on that over the next few minutes. Well, before we look ahead, one final look at this current storm system using WSI's Intellicast.com for the latest radar imagery. Here is the impact right now, that powerful storm. Again, just a couple of rain and snow showers in the southern part of the Mid-Atlantic region, D.C. across the Delmarva Peninsula, more accumulating snow up across the cold sector, the northwest side of this storm, which again is located right now upstate PA. Western New York, for example, getting some significant snow right now. And it's all rain. Eastern Massachusetts, even along the coastline of Maine with those ocean flow, that strong ocean flow of air, east to southeast winds for now. But again, the whole system gradually moving up to the north and northeast over the next several hours. But the strong winds will remain right through the day and even into tonight, perhaps up to 50 miles per hour or so. Well, let's kind of look ahead now, and again, I think the next couple of weeks, right through the remainder of the month of January, looks like a colder than normal weather pattern for sure in the central and eastern U.S. Doesn't mean there'll be individual days near normal or even above normal, but overall, the next couple of weeks will not only feature below normal cold, but even a possibility of some extreme cold, especially during the last week of the month of January. In general, the teleconnection indices such as the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Arctic Oscillation, suggest we'll have a cold and even an active pattern over the next couple of weeks in the eastern U.S. And here's another one of those teleconnection indices we like to look at, the PNA, the Pacific North America index here. And when it is in positive territory, that generally suggests could be colder than normal weather in the central and eastern U.S., and it did cross over into positive territory a few days ago, and looks like it'll remain in positive territory over the next several days. So right here, this is a bullish sign for some colder than normal conditions in the next week or two across the central and eastern U.S. When the PNA is in positive territory, you often have a ridge of high pressure, higher heights than normal across places like western Canada, and that allows for the transport of some cold air masses from way up there in northwestern Canada down into the central and eastern U.S. Well, in fact, let's take a look at some of the upper air flow patterns, at least forecasted here by the ensemble runs. First, we're looking at the daily ensemble run from the GFS in terms of 500 millibar height anomalies. This is as we begin the week here on Monday morning, January 17th, a large upper level low situated along the in the eastern states associated with that powerful storm system, which is now located in upstate Pennsylvania. Let's now move forward here and watch how this evolves over the next several days. We'll have a little bit of milder conditions by midweek here in the mid-Atlantic region. Probably the warmest day of the week will be Wednesday, but then another strong cold front passes through on Wednesday night, early Thursday, ushers in a colder air mass for Thursday, and it gets really progressively colder. By the time we get to Friday, quite cold weather again returns to the mid-Atlantic region, the northeastern part of the nation. And we talked a little while ago about the PNA being in positive territory, and that's suggestive of high pressure ridging out across western Canada. Well, here we go. By this Friday, this is a strong ridge popping up along the west coast of Canada into Alaska, and that generally allows for the transport of very cold air masses. You can see the general flow like this, allowing for the transport of some very cold air up across Alaska, northwestern Canada, into the central U.S., and that ultimately ends up spilling over into the eastern states. So right here, this is a reflection of that positive PNA that we saw as forecasted for the next couple of weeks. Now let's move forward here, and we'll see what happens here as we get into the upcoming weekend. Notice this upper level low starting to reestablish itself over the upcoming weekend. Here we are by Sunday afternoon. This is a pretty active looking and a cold looking type of weather pattern for the central and eastern states, when you have upper level lows sitting right in this region right here, combined with kind of a high pressure ridge off the west coast of Canada, Alaska, again allowing for the transport of cold air masses into the central and eastern U.S. You even have some signs of some blocking up across just south of Greenland with higher heights than normal. So this pattern here with upper level ridging over the North Atlantic, a deep upper level trough setting up over the eastern U.S., strong high pressure ridging out across western coast of Canada, and even this low pressure trough here southeast of Hawaii. That kind of argues for a trough in the eastern part of the nation as well. This overall pattern is quite cold looking, quite stormy looking. This happens to be for the latter part of the upcoming week, and I think there'll be a storm threat in the eastern U.S. anytime from, let's say, late Friday through the upcoming weekend, and this kind of a pattern remains as we go into the last week of January. Well, that 500 millibar height anomaly forecast set of maps was from the ensemble run of the GFS. Let's look at the ensemble run of the European model going forward. Now this happens to be only at 24-hour increments. This is for this evening, Monday evening. This upper level low is again associated with the powerful storm system right now up across the northeastern part of the nation. Let's move ahead. Again, this is in 24-hour increments. Tuesday evening forecast map, Wednesday evening, and here we have probably the mildest day of the week. D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, not warm by any stretch of the imagination, but probably the mildest day of the week. And then another incoming cold air mass, and here we go. It's starting to set up here, very interesting here. By the time we get to Friday night, we have upper level lows starting to build here across the southeastern part of the nation. At the same time, The GFS ensemble run had this higher heights to normal here across the western part of Canada, as does the European model. And look at this wind flow right here. Very impressive for bringing in cold air masses right into the central and eastern U.S. They typically will spill out over into the eastern U.S. if they make it into the northern plains with this kind of a wind flow. But this, again, indicative of that positive PNA, and actually everything out here is suggested of the other teleconnection indices as well, the what we call the EPO, Eastern Pacific Oscillation, and the WPO, Western Pacific, are both in negative territory. That also kind of goes along with the positive PNA for allowing cold air outbreaks to make it into the central and eastern U.S. We did not show the index values for the EPO and WPO, but they go into negative territory and correlated with a positive PNA. This is the kind of the wind flow that you get. Let's move forward here another 24 hours. And here we go. Look at this. By the time we get to Sunday evening, and again, the GFS had a very interesting pattern too. Sunday, same time frame. Cold, stormy look to it with deep upper level low in the eastern U.S. High pressure ridging out across western Canada, Alaska, and even some signs of a block here over just to the south of Greenland and the North Atlantic, and that low, upper level low southeast of Hawaii, which argues for a trough in the eastern U.S. as well. Very interesting weather pattern here for the upcoming week and going into the early part of next week. We can go out a little bit farther in time, and here we go all the way out to the early part of next week. And by the way, this could be some very, very cold air by this time. We're talking next week, the last full week of the month of January. This could be some very cold air, especially we get a storm system in the eastern states over the weekend on its backside. Behind it, it could pull in some extreme cold for the eastern U.S. sometime next week. We'll go all the way out here into the middle part of next week, and continuation of a very cold and active weather pattern for the eastern U.S. with that deep upper level trough remaining in place here over the eastern U.S. all the way out to the middle part of next week. Well, we talked up front about the fact that these teleconnection indices, the WPO, the EPO, the PNA, as well as the North Atlantic indices like the NAO and the AO, all tend to be suggestive of a cold weather pattern and active weather pattern, stormy weather pattern over the next couple of weeks. Well, it's certainly reflected in the 850 millibar 5-day averages. We'll look at this going forward from the current 5-day period, and this is using the ensemble run of the GFS from 6Z. We'll look at, from the current 5-day period all the way out to days 12 to 16. Blue represents below normal temperatures averaged out for that 5-day period. Again, colder than normal weather pattern for the next couple of weeks doesn't mean we can't have individual days at or above normal, but overall the average will tend to be below normal going forward the next couple of weeks. Days 1 to 5, days 2 to 6, 3 to 7. And notice also it gets kind of increasingly cold relative to normal here. This is all the way out to days 6 to 10, which represents the 22nd of January to January 27th. Next week, the last full week of January. Again, some signs it could be some extreme cold. By the way, in an ensemble run, they tend to become less and less extreme as you go forward with time, because they tend to be influenced more and more by climatology that tends to smooth things out. So the fact that we're actually getting colder and colder relative to normal in an ensemble run is very impressive indeed. Let's go out even farther in time. Look at that. Look at this. This is all the way out to days 7 to 11, spilling out over the Great Lakes into the Northeast, days 8 to 12, the 24th to the 29th. Just a very impressively cold look to it here, especially for next week in the central and eastern U.S., going out as far as this can go, out days 10 to 12, 11 to 15, and all the way out to the early part of February. This runs from January 28th to the 2nd again. Very impressive signal from the ensemble run that again tends to smooth things out with time. Could include some extreme cold here, colder than normal on a 5-day average going right into the early part of February for the central and eastern U.S., and it'll be active as well. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from the operational run of the GFS from 6Z. Again, dealing with that storm system in the mid-Atlantic, the northeast U.S. Even when it shoots on by to the north of your particular area, you'll experience some very strong wind gusts throughout the day today. This is the evening forecast map, and look at this very tight pressure gradient between the low pressure area over New England and high pressure down across the southern U.S. This pressure gradient right here argues for 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts right through the day and even into the night in the mid-Atlantic, in the northeast U.S. And then we get into the day on Tuesday, a calmer day, but still quite a bit colder than normal. Bit of a warm-up in the mid-Atlantic region ahead of this next strong cold front. Wednesday, again, perhaps the mildest day of the week, but not warm in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. And look at this influx of cold air here by the middle of the week. Right here, very impressive influx of cold air. You see the thickness value right here, 498. The thickness value between 500 millibars and 1,000 millibars, the lower half of the atmosphere. That's what these dashed blue lines represent. And when you get down to 498 thickness, that's below zero kind of air heading into the northern plains by the middle of the week. Let's move forward here, and here we go. By the time we get to Wednesday night, there's a strong cold front in this particular scenario, right in this region, right here. By the time we get to Wednesday night, crashing to the south and east. Again, it'll be milder ahead of it on Wednesday, but then turning progressively colder behind it in the mid-Atlantic, in the northeast U.S. on Thursday and Friday. Now let's move forward here. That cold front comes through, maybe even a period of snow. We'll have to watch for that. Late Wednesday night, early Thursday from D.C. across the Delmarva Peninsula. This is the Thursday morning forecast map, and I think this is a believable scenario here. There could even be, as I say, a period of steadier snow on the backside of that cold front early Thursday morning in the eastern part of the Mid-Atlantic region up along New England coastline. That comes on through. It gets progressively colder going into Friday. This is the Friday forecast map here, and there are not one but maybe two different threats for the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast U.S. We'll have to monitor these over the next couple of days. Maybe early in the weekend, here we go. Threat number one right here, Friday night. The GFS currently has that a little bit too far to the south and east. And then we go a little bit farther ahead, maybe a second threat we'll have to watch for. This is now going into Sunday morning. Also too far to the south and east, but both of these will have to be watched. The overall pattern, as we saw up front here, conducive to some storm systems in the eastern U.S. over the next week to 2 weeks, and very likely a colder than normal pattern going right into the early part of February for the central and eastern U.S. That's it for now. An extensive video discussion this morning. That's it for now. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.